I think we'll see a substantial reduction in inflation in the year ahead.
It's going to take a year.
Well, I believe by the end of next year, you will see much lower inflation if there's not an unanticipated shock.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about the economy, okay? Because if you guys didn't know, the Federal Reserve is actively trying to crash and destroy the economy. Yes, you heard that correctly. The feds are actively trying to crash and destroy the economy in order to rein in inflation, which has been cooling off. Okay, I think last month it came in around like 7% or something like that, which is an improvement over the 8 to 9% figure that we had been seeing months prior. But that's still high, right? 7% is still high. So the feds are increasing interest rates dramatically. It's been 75 basis points or 0.75% over the past few times they've raised interest rates. And just earlier this week, they decided to raise interest rates another 50 basis points or 0.5%, again, in order to rein in inflation. Now, what does this mean? Well, what it means is that money is going to become more expensive, okay? This is what we call quantitative tightening, right? Money's going to be more expensive. It's going to be harder for people to borrow. The Fed is trying to incentivize people to stop spending money.
Every interest rate hike ripples through the economy, affecting everyday Americans. Near Philly, small business Eric and Christopher makes silkscreen pillows and totes. They'd like to expand, but higher rates are making a small business loan too expensive, just as inflation drives up costs, forcing them to cut employee hours.
It's kind of a scary time. I can't pursue ideas and dreams, if you will, to grow the business to other levels, to other avenues, to other outlets at this time.
The Fed's decision today to hike interest rates by another half point could put those dreams even further out of reach. This seventh interest rate hike of the year comes as inflation appears to be slowing, running at 7.1% year over year. Better than the 9.1% last June, but still too high.
We understand the hardship that high inflation is causing.
Fed Chairman Jerome Powell today saying the Fed will keep raising rates through the new year, making credit cards and new loans more expensive, affecting mortgages, and likely pushing up unemployment.
I wish there were a completely painless way to restore price stability. There isn't, and this is the best we can do.
While gas prices have dropped, food and rent prices are still too high.
The Fed is going further, and even though there's been two better than expected inflation reports, the Fed still feels like it has a lot more work to do.
The Fed wants to bring inflation down from 7% to 2%. Hiking interest rates remains the best tool to get that done.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. A lot of pain and suffering coming because, according to Janet Yellen, the Fed has to do this, and it's your fault. It is your fault for spending too much money, for splurging, for buying, food and necessities. Your fault, according to Janet Yellen.
Can you explain how inflation got so high? Because 2 years ago, everything seemed fine. Even in 2021, and you and other members of the administration believed that inflation was a small risk. What happened, simply and clearly?
That's a challenge.
That is, yeah.
So we had a rapid recovery from the pandemic. When President Biden was elected, unemployment was quite high. It was close to 7%. And we put policies in place that generated a very rapid recovery. Unemployment quickly fell back into the threes.
Where is it now?
3.7.
Okay.
So normally you wouldn't expect, just because you had a rapid recovery, for inflation to rise very much, if at all. But it turned out the pandemic had very special impacts on the economy. Remember, everybody stopped spending on services. They were in their homes for a year or more. They wanted to buy grills and office furniture. They were working from home. They suddenly started splurging on goods, buying technology. We suddenly working through technology, and bottlenecks started developing where supply in particular important sectors of the economy just couldn't keep up with demand.
Yeah, so don't you just love how they frame these conversations about inflation and the economy, right? Because Janet Yellen is not wrong in the sense that, yes, strong consumer demand and having a limited supply chain definitely contributed to inflation. But she doesn't talk about why those things happen, okay? Why were we in that situation in the first place? Well, it's because of Democrat policies promoting lockdowns, right? Lockdowns that put people out of work, that affected the supply chain, made it harder to get goods and services to the people. While at the same time, you had a Democrat administration that wanted to pour fuel on an already hot economy by printing trillions of dollars and putting it into an economy that already was hot, basically stimulating more consumer demand. What do you think people are going to do when you just keep giving them stimulus checks? When you keep paying them not to go to work, what do you think they're going to do? You think they're just going to sit on the money and not spend it? No, of course they're going to spend the money, right? And they spent the money, and people are acting like, well, well, it's their fault they spent the money, right? It's their fault that you was going out buying stuff, taking care of your family, buying food, okay? That's your fault, right? Well, again, it's not their fault or our fault that we were put in this situation in the first place. It's also not our fault that the Federal Reserve did a terrible job of predicting what was obviously going to happen as a result of historic monetary or quantitative easing, okay, which is lowering interest rates almost to damn near zero when the pandemic first happened in response to the pandemic, plus printing trillions of dollars, okay? So money was very cheap to borrow, so companies could just borrow money to stay afloat. They are also being given money by the federal government. That created a very inflationary environment, okay? And the Fed was not forward-looking enough to start to raise interest rates last year in 2021 like I advocated for them to do. And I said that they would have to raise interest rates a lot sooner than they thought. No. We're going to keep interest rates low because what we care about is unemployment, right? We care about getting unemployment to as low as we can. When the reality is that yes, they have been successful when it comes to lowering the unemployment rate and getting people back to work. However, the problem is that the unemployment rate is going to go right back up because now companies are starting to lay off people because of the increase in interest rates, and we're increasing interest rates at a historic rate. They're the highest they've been in like 15 years. Okay, they haven't been this high in a long time. So when we're increasing interest rates at 75 to 50 basis points per cycle, that has large effects on the economy. Okay, it makes money a lot more expensive very, very quickly. And again, people are going to get laid off. People are going to lose their jobs. But the reason why we're in this situation is, one, because of the Fed's loose policies, and also, two, because of all the money that we spent, but also because, again, the Fed did not have the foresight to see that, hey, this type of inflation disaster was coming. Remember, they told us inflation is transitory, right? They believed it was just an idea, like Antifa, right? It's just an idea. Don't worry about it, guys. Don't worry about all the trillions of dollars we spent. Don't worry about money being stupid cheap, right? Don't worry about all that. The party will last forever. And they did not start to raise interest rates early enough. If they would have done that last year, let's say they would have done it, maybe the summer of 2021, which is when I believe they should have started to do it, they could have done it at a lot slower pace. It would not be at the pace that it is right now, in which, again, now the Fed, they're literally trying to drive the economy into a recession. They are celebrating layoffs, right? They're celebrating companies getting rid of employees, cutting spending, because they know that there's too much money floating around in the economy, and that is what's contributing to inflation continuing to be so high. But again, the reason why we're in this situation that has nothing to do with the American people and their habits, right? Their consumption habits has more to do with the fact that the government put them in a position to spend all this money in the first place, to not go to work, which had severe effects on supply chain and the availability of certain goods and services. which put upward pressure on prices. Again, this was all done by the government. This situation was 100% created by the government. It's just going to be funny, but really not funny because people, again, are going to lose their jobs over this. It's going to be funny to see who do they blame when we go into a full-blown recession, okay? Because I believe that technically we had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. We are in a recession, in my opinion, but I think they're going to drive us into a deeper recession, a recession that's going to be so deep that it will be undeniable to the mainstream liberal media. And I wonder who would they blame, right? Are they going to blame the Republicans? They're going to blame the GOP? Are they going to blame the people? Well, you guys aren't spending enough money. You guys stop spending money. This is why we're in a recession. You laid yourself off, right? Is that what they're going to do? Again, it's just amazing to me how these people never take responsibility. But what will probably end up happening is that they probably are not going to keep raising interest rates throughout 2023 like they said they will. The same way they had to start raising interest rates, even though they claimed they wouldn't in early 2022, they had to start doing it. I think they're probably going to stop raising rates once inflation gets down to maybe under 5%, maybe 4% on a consistent basis. I think they'll probably slow down on the rate increases, which means there's probably going to be a pivot. Okay, they're probably going to pivot their monetary policy. They might even start decreasing interest rates again, and we'll see what happens. It's just interesting, right? We're in probably the most predictable market ever. As you can see, if you guys have been paying attention to the market over the last couple weeks, we had a nice rally leading up to the end of the year in anticipation that the Feds would go ahead and do a Fed pivot, considering that we have more optimistic inflation data. However, that didn't happen, and now the markets are tanking because they're like, the Fed won't let us continue our party. Right, so it's just kind of funny how that works and the things that is happening here. But what I want you guys to know is that, the economy is going to get worse because the Feds are purposely trying to tank the economy because they mistimed or they misanticipated the actual damage that inflation would do to the economy, and they acted too late. And now they're trying to say, well, the consumers were spending too much money, right? Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.